Yeah, this year I got more serious about it and I started trying to like acquire local yarn because now I'm trying to only knit with natural fibers. So that's like a new journey.
This is Serious Grower Podcast. I'm Anna. I'm an entomologist. I'm a scientist, and I'm using this podcast to talk to all kinds of growers and eaters who are serious about their farms, their gardens, their local food systems, and I am asking, how can science help? Today's co-host is Susan. She is a professor of agriculture at the University of New Hampshire. She also runs a community garden and works with students and community members across a wide range of age groups. You'll hear plenty from her as she has a ton of experience in both commercial and non-commercial farming. But just like the rest of us, she has many interests, a couple of young children, and a family schedule to keep organized.
I feel like technology is there, but maybe I'm not using it right because I feel like my Apple calendar should sync with my work calendar better. And also, like when a school sends you the calendar for the year, it should be like a button that just adds it to your calendar. Not like this graph that I have to translate into my calendar. And then I have another one. None of our holidays really link up anymore. So it's just, I don't know, I'm a very organized person. And yet still I feel like I don't quite have the system figured out.
Well, because there's too many systems.
I used to keep a lot of stuff in my head and I forget too many things now to keep it all in my head.
Yeah. Well, you'll figure it out.
How are you?
Life is so complicated. I've been doing some press. I had one day last week where I had a phone interview for a job and I had 3 press interviews all in the same day.
A lot of talking.
It's a lot of talking, but what happened was I had applied for this job because it was a really good job. And I was like, oh, I have a lot of strong emotions about this. It kind of surprised me how negatively I reacted to preparing my package for the application because I hadn't really experienced any feelings of loss about my job at USDA. When I got fired, I was like, okay, execute the plan, don't feel anything. And so it's I've been doing this, that, and the other thing, and never really thought my career as I know it is over. The job that I worked my whole way to get, I don't have that anymore. And not until I started applying to another serious big girl job did I start feeling that feeling of loss and anger. And it totally translated in the interview.
Oh, no.
All the questions were well, what would you do to build your program? And I was like, yeah, whatever. It was really bad. And so I got off the phone. I was like, oh, that went bad. But then I didn't even have a minute to think about it because I had another interview with Science or NPR. And I had to sell them on this crazy idea. I was like, actually, it's really great I got fired. It's great that everything's torn apart and everything we know is over. That's great. We're going to do new cool things. So that's what I'm going through.
That's hard.
Emotionally. It's just weird.
Yeah.
I'm fine. There's so many people who have it so much worse than I do. My city is not under siege by, ICE or whatever, and I'm not being detained somewhere. I think even young scientists are in a worse position than I am right now. At least I have some laurels to rest on. I'm in a place in my career where I have good networks. I have the number of people who have wanted to help, there's just you and me, having these conversations. That's so nice. It's so nice.
You could give yourself more credit because you've created these connections over how many years of being in
so you were just graduating from a PhD right now.
Yeah.
What would you do? Anyway, I do have a couple of things I want to talk to you about, but I thought maybe we could talk about fiber a little bit.
Okay. My brain for a second was fiber intake of eating. And I was like, that's definitely not what she wants to talk about.
I've been dying to talk to you about your fiber intake. Are you regular, Susan?
I could always do better, Anna.
I think it really throws people off when I talk about fiber arts. You're talking about knitting.
Yeah, that's what you're talking about, right?
Tell me about knitting.
What do you know about knitting? How much I love it.
How much you love it.
I'm wearing something I made right now.
That's beautiful. I love it.
Thank you. I started knitting when I was in high school, I guess, but not really seriously. I just made blankets and whatever with the cheapest yarn I could find, basically. I also did that in college. It was a lot for mental health reasons. And then I kind of put it down for a while. I started crocheting at some point. It used to really frustrate me because I feel like I just didn't know enough. So like if I dropped a stitch, it was like the end of the world. And I was like, I give up.
Start over.
Yeah. And I'm like, I can't. That was too much for me, for my heart. So I started crocheting and I really liked that. And I did that for a while. But then I was really wanting to make more garments for like my wardrobe. Like I wanted to knit with a purpose for myself because I always was like knitting for other people or crocheting for other people,
Mhm.
like making baby blankets or making like baby items or gifts for other people. And I'm like, okay, what about me? And what would bring me joy for, because I love gift giving, but also I want to knit something for my wardrobe that I can wear over and over again. So I finally started knitting again. Yeah. And then this year I got more serious about it and I started trying to like acquire local yarn because now I'm trying to only knit with natural fibers. So that's like a new journey. And of course, I love to
Yeah.
research and like do the most. So actually, behind me, there's a bag of raw wool hanging that I don't know what to do with, but I have it. So I could do something with it.
What made you want to shift into more natural things?
I was just thinking of like the sustainability of it. And I guess I have more trust in myself of what I'm making that I'm actually going to like it and wear it and like want to wear it. So part of it is just like investing in myself. I think like also when I was first knitting, like I really didn't have the money to buy wool fiber, good high quality content, whether it's like sheep or alpaca or whatever, is definitely more expensive. And so back then I just didn't really have the budget for it. And now I'm like, well, if I'm going to spend like 40 hours making this sweater, I'm going to spend money on the yard and then I'm going to hopefully wear it. So,
So it's very clear to me that you have the chops to make it into something beautiful. Like me, I would not invest in high quality materials because like I know I would not be able to make anything out of it.
I mean, I go to like YouTube University a lot. So the internet is an amazing resource for fiber arts because just like farming, there's so many ways to do like one thing. And so you can watch like 5 different videos on the same technique or method, but they're all going to do it slightly different. You just find the one that works for you and then you just figure it out. That's how I've gotten much better knitting.
Speaking of YouTube University, Susan recently sent me an Instagram reel of a knitter she really loves who is dealing with an infestation in her yarn stockpile, which reminded me of a whole area of pest management that really doesn't get enough attention, that is stored product pests. Well, there's two groups that get lumped together because they live and thrive pretty much exclusively in human environments, and that is stored product pests and fiber pests. Stored product pests target our food supplies, and fiber pests target our natural textiles. Pests like Indian meal moth, granary weevil, cigarette beetle, confused flower beetle. These are economic pests of grains in storage facilities. On very rare occasions, they can find their way to consumers, but there are some very concerted efforts to keep these facilities pest-free. Whole area of IPM that's very important. Then you have your fiber pests, clothes moths, carpet beetles. These fiber pests specialize in digesting keratin. This is a protein found in natural animal fibers. They rarely attack pure synthetic or plant-based fabrics like cotton unless they're blended with wool or they're soiled with food or body oils. Back in the day when we only had natural fibers, these insects were much more common. You don't really hear about them very often anymore. Nor do you see people buying mothballs to protect their clothes from infestations of these moths or beetles. Old school mothballs are treated with naphthalene, which is really just a repellent. Like cedar chests, this is a preventative measure that keeps moths from attacking natural fibers, and they really don't have much impact once you have an infestation. It sounds like this poor woman from the Instagram reel that Susan shared with me had discovered a clothes moth infestation. As an integrated pest management educator, I was very proud of her efforts because IPM teaches you to use multiple tactics using the insect's biology against them to approach a pest management situation. And she pulled out all of the IPM tools from the IPM toolbox. She bagged up everything in Ziploc bags, excluding other pests, and then she stuck them in a freezer for quite a long time, actually a couple of weeks. Then she put out these parasitic wasps to go hunt out any larvae that might be in her house that she didn't know about. I looked at the product that she was using and found out it was trichogramma. I don't know if this would be the approach I would take for a household pest infestation, but very interesting indeed. I showed Susan a few photos of the most common household pests. So check out our Instagram page at Serious Grower to see what we were talking about. I wanted to show you a picture of the trichogramma wasps that she was releasing afterward. Can you see what I'm looking at?
Yes.
And you can see how cute they are.
Yes.
So it was just funny because Casey and I were talking about these the other day, and I think we were looking at this one, and she was like, wow, they're so small.
Whoa. They're so tiny.
Yes, they are. And why it was funny to me is that these are used frequently in vegetable production and not necessarily in your house.
Yeah, that was kind of my question is like, could they survive in like a residential house?
Yeah, but why? Would you want them to?
Yeah, that was my question. Was like, so she's trying to like hit it on all fronts, right? She's like, I have moths in my yarn, but they're probably living places other than my yarn, is my guess. Like, would they be able to find it in her house?
Yeah, they definitely could.
Oh, okay.
They would definitely be able to find it, but they wouldn't be able to solve the problem 100%.
Right.
Another thing I might think about, and this is a detail that you'll probably see it now that I've brought it up, and it might be one of those things you don't want to know. I've noticed this a couple times. Have you ever heard of Indian meal moth?
No.
So there are a bunch of pests. We call them stored product pests because they are insects that have kind of evolved to make their living. And by make their living, I mean they complete their full life cycle within stored products. So if you think about big grain bins, like people will grow grains and they'll harvest them and they're taken to the grain elevator and they're stored somewhere and then they're processed into stuff that we buy.
Right.
What I do want to show you is here are some examples of Indian meal moth traps, right? So these are pheromone baited traps. There's like a little sticky bottom in there. And I have seen these in grocery stores, like in the flour aisle.
Wow.
And so you'll see them, they're kind of hung above the aisle. And what that indicates to me is they had an Indian meal moth outbreak in one of their products. And probably what happened was that they discovered this. They probably destroyed all of the product that had Indian meal moth in it, but then followed up with these traps to see if there was still moths in the area.
Yeah.
So just to monitor to see if they're there.
Gotcha.
And I wonder if that would have been a better approach for her to like just have some peace of mind that there weren't any moths in her house.
Right.
Rather than releasing an army of tiny, tiny wasps.
And then presumably they're flying around and they're going to become a nuisance themselves.
I don't know. You know what would probably happen is that they would emerge from the little boxes that she put out, fly around for like a day or two, and all die.
Yeah.
And they're so tiny.
Yeah. Kind of a waste, maybe.
Maybe. I found it so intriguing, though. And every time I see trichogramma ever, I'm like, ooh, I know her. I know her. For the most part, a few days in a freezer should kill 100% of these kinds of infestations. Our conversation turned to steaming, using heat instead of cold, and actually turned to the big boss of structural IPM, and that is bed bugs. If you had a situation where you had bed bugs, that's where you have to get like really, really hot steamers in order to get the eggs for bed bugs.
Bed bugs are like my worst fear.
I mean, it's a real fear.
Yeah, it is. We had the apartment below us when we lived in Providence. They had bed bugs, and I was terrified that we were going to get bed bugs.
I mean, it's crazy that you didn't get them, actually.
I know. They had an exterminator. Like, they found them so quickly, and the exterminator came.
Do you know what the exterminator did?
I don't remember. My husband also had bed bugs when he lived in Providence when he was in, like, college. And I think they had to have an exterminator come multiple times, but it was...
That's terrible.
So it reminds me why I shouldn't buy bedding or anything on Facebook Marketplace.
Well, the thing about bedding, which is great, is that like just like a regular old dryer treatment is all you need to do for bed bugs. So, I mean, I think the best advice the best advice for bed bugs is like, don't be ashamed of it because it happens to everybody.
Hmm.
And the more you put your head in the sand about it, the more likely you are to wait and not nip it in the bud, right?
Yeah.
I think they could come into people's houses in a couple different ways. One is like bringing in bedding, which if you launder it normally, no problem. Something I didn't think about, somebody brought up recently, was library books.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I was talking to someone and they were talking about how they put their not library books, but when they buy antique books or even used books, they put them in the freezer for a certain amount of time. And I was like, oh, smart.
Or they make these shelves for dryers that you can set things so like they don't spin. They just sit right in the middle of the dryer and that would work.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, I
That's
think
cool.
that's a possibility. But again, that would be somebody who buys a lot of old vintage things. But like that is the thing nowadays. Like all the young hip kids, that's the way that they do sustainability.
Yeah, I get a lot of things like free or gently used, so I should probably maybe think a little bit harder about when I
Your
bring them into my house.
yeah, your protocol, your
Yeah.
intake protocol.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think regular laundering, that's nice to know.
I guess I don't really bring many like clothing items. Like when I'm getting clothing, it's from somebody I know. So I would hope that they would tell me.
They might not know,
Yeah.
or, they might be in denial or not put two and two together. So, for example, when I was at Extension, we had the first report of this new tick that is called the longhorn tick, which is really funny because it doesn't have really noticeable antenna, but just like it has like protrusions that are notable for ticks. What makes this tick different than the ticks that we're used to, it doesn't spread diseases, so it's not of concern there, but it has parthenocarpic reproduction. So you know how we're saying the entomological world has like all sorts of weird approaches to reproduction. This reproduces without, it's asexually, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like it's giving birth to like genetically identical offspring.
Mm-hmm.
And this lady came to visit her friend from an area where the longhorn tick was. And she came to visit her friend in New Hampshire. And she had like a little lap dog, like a little fluffy white, adorable lap dog. And it was covered in these ticks. Like there was like thousands of these ticks on this little dog.
Oh,
How would you not notice that?
that seems crazy.
This poor woman who had a friend come and visit, like she had everybody from the state going and like doing tick drags. Like, have you ever seen when they monitor for ticks, they have like a big square of white fabric that they drag and that picks up ticks. It's a sampling method. So she had all these officials for the state dragging white pieces of cloth all over her backyard.
Oh my God.
I brought this up to somebody else who was like a tick expert, and he's like, that is so funny because when we first started developing methods to scout for ticks, before we came up with the standard, 1 by 1 meter white cloth, we had like a fluffy white dog, like a stuffed animal that we drag around.
Oh my God.
It kind of came full circle. Bedbug, adults, nymphs, and their eggs are highly sensitive to extreme temperatures, so you can avoid bringing infestations into your house pretty easily. Achieving 100% mortality depends on the specific temperature and the duration of that exposure. I did some homework and I found out that you can totally use regular household freezer to kill bed bugs and their eggs. About an hour below 18 degrees C should do it. Most household freezers are set to this temperature. It takes a little time for room temperature items to achieve the same temperature as ambient freezer temperatures, so freezing a thrifted item overnight should do the trick. For most things that you're going to wash anyway, a regular cycle in the washer and dryer will also do the trick. Most modern household dryers reach internal temperatures high enough to kill all life stages within a standard cycle. And that is provided the dryer is not overloaded. So allowing for proper air circulation, just put one or two things in there, a minimum of 30 minutes at a high heat setting. That's great. This is also a good time to remind you that cleaning out your lint traps can also be helpful at improving circulation and avoiding house fires. Bringing in new big stuff that can't fit into a freezer or can't fit into a dryer, that's a little trickier. That is why thrift stores do not take mattresses anymore. They don't even take couches with fold-out beds, and then that's how strict these rules are. Steam cleaners can deliver some heat that over time can help, but only certain models of steamers get hot enough to eliminate infestation. With a brief pass, getting through materials can decrease that temperature too. So multiple treatments would be needed to ensure you get all the adults and nymphs and eggs in the cracks and crevices of a big mattress. There was some talk about larger apartment buildings investing in heat boxes, because a couple of hours at 120 degrees Fahrenheit should do the trick. But who is really investing in such things? Find a link in the show notes to a couple different resources if you are dealing with something like this. Lots of options for you out there. It is not the end of the world. It's a horrible, horrible thing to happen to you, but don't wait. Do something about it. This conversation about repurposing materials, thrifted materials, and a conversation I had with Casey a while back about plastics and agriculture had me thinking about row cover and maybe a new, maybe silly project. Something that might be fun and interesting to serious home gardeners who want to get going early in the spring or keep going late in the fall and want to avoid chill injury to their plants. Commercial growers use these spun-bound row covers that hold a blanket of warm air close to the ground and can keep plants a few degrees warmer over the course of a chilly night. These row covers, you might hear people call them Rime, which is a brand name that got co-opted as the name of a more generic thing. It's kind of like saying Kleenex when you mean tissue or saying Google when you mean internet search. These row covers are created through a process where continuous polyester filaments are laid down in a random pattern and bonded together using heat and pressure rather than being woven like traditional cloth. They're super cheap and they have a ton of really amazing functions on the farm. But a home gardener who is avoiding plastic or synthetic materials might want a different option. I am wondering if a home gardener could repurpose a sheet for this. I know I have a ton of materials that I do not want to throw away because it feels so wasteful. So I just keep them and I keep moving them around the country with me. But for why? What am I imagining is going to happen? I need to escape from some second story bedroom window and I need to tie my sheets together to escape some danger. Is there going to be some impromptu toga party? Like, why am I keeping? I presume other people feel the same way that I do. Could we be repurposing these sheets, either the ones that we hang on to or maybe thrifted? But first, I'm curious about materials. Fibers are generally categorized by their origin: animal, plant, or synthetic. I don't think there's a whole lot of sheets out there made from animal fibers, like wool from a sheep or an alpaca or cashmere goat. I know silk comes from insect cocoons, but that's extremely expensive. We're not even going to think about that. Many sheets are made from plant sources. Cotton comes from the seed pods of cotton plants. Linen is made from the stems of flax plants, and hemp fabrics are made using a very similar process, using the stems and beating them into a fiber that's useful and weavable. When we're talking about bamboo sheets, what we're really talking about is rayon or viscose, which is produced by dissolving wood pulp from stuff like bamboo, beech trees, eucalyptus, all sorts of different wood pulps. Those are dissolved in chemicals and spun into fiber. Rayon definitely starts its life from a plant, but it's been kind of Frankenstein into something a little different. It's in between natural and chemical synthetic fiber. Then we have the real synthetic fibers. So things like polyester, acrylics, nylons, they start their life as petroleum-based products and are processed into something else, right? So essentially plastics that are processed into something that mimics natural fibers, but with much more durability, much more flexibility. I'm thinking about taking a trip to the thrift store to see what I can get my hands on. And there's like so many blended things, and see if we can do some quick and dirty field trials and learn something new about how these materials retain heat in outdoor settings. I had to think this through a little bit. I caught up with Susan at her teaching tunnels to get some advice about this really silly project, whether or not this is a silly idea or something helpful could come of it. But first, she gave me a tour of what was going on in her classroom.
It's kind of a mix, just so we have some flexibility. I put way too many tomatoes and peppers last year. I just usually want to fill every space with that, but it was too much. So we'll probably do a round of daikons and Napa cabbage for some kimchi, maybe some shorter season crops, like maybe we'll keep some radishes and greens until it gets too hot in there. And yeah, I just got all the seed orders in like a week and a half ago. And we started our tomatoes and peppers yesterday. An eggplant in the other tunnel. It is a mix of greens and radishes and peas And then that will all get flipped by June-ish over to tomatoes and some cucumbers. We're gonna try loofah squash this year. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I don't know if we're gonna be able to protect it from cucumber stripe beetle long enough for it to survive, but
Well, Caleb says they don't prefer it.
oh, perfect. No, it looks good in here. We did a lot of work in here the past couple weeks to get it. Yeah, it looks really nice and neat right now. I have a good group that like get along well and are happy to be out here working. There's a lot of community building, which is always nice. We had Amber out here the other day, and she found some aphids she couldn't quickly identify. So that's always fun. They weren't the peach, whatever ones. We were talking about why sanitation's important, including like the head of the house and the end of the house. And I picked this like random weed of like red Russian kale and I flipped it over and it was just covered in aphids. And I was like, and this is why? And like, I keep a pretty tight ship here and it was still rough.
So I asked her how she uses row covers professionally.
I don't really use them a lot on this farm, mostly because in the heated tunnel, I really only use row cover for germination. I find that our soil type benefits from being covered to keep moisture in the soil long enough for seeds to germinate to be able to have the strength to push through a crusty soil, or prevents it from getting crusty, basically. In the field, I don't grow anything that I have to protect in the fall. Everything is ideally harvested in September. In the unheated tunnel, I have used row covers before over things like spinach for overwintering. I did onions once, but it's mostly just frost protection. I've never really used it here for pest exclusion. I feel like every time I do use row cover, specifically at this farm, I always end up with a worse pest problem of some sort. So I try to stay away from it, honestly. It really set aphids out of control one year in like January, which felt kind of awful. Also, we have so many rodents that they're like super highway, like live under the row cover. Especially when there was a period where I wasn't taking it off every day, like in the dead of the winter. I was like, you know what, there's not enough light to do anything anyway. I'll just leave the row cover on. And then there was just like so much rodent damage.
We had a little conversation about how a home gardener might deploy a sheet instead of a spun-bound row cover. Susan runs a community garden, so she's seen a lot of creativity going into how infrastructure is deployed in those gardeners' beds. A lot of repurposed items in those gardens. Very cool, very creative. And I think I might have converted her into thinking this is a project worth pursuing.
You would need a lot of support. Once it gets wet, it's gonna, like you think of a bed sheet when you take it out of the washing machine and then it's wet.
Right.
Like row cover dries up and it doesn't sag. I guess since you have a really, really thick blanket and you're not supporting it well, row cover, like some of the stuff that you'd use for like maybe strawberries or something, that might get saggy, but like in general, a morning dew on a row cover is gonna be gone by 9 a.m.
Right.
But with a bed sheet, I highly doubt that's gonna happen unless you treat it with something to shed the water faster. Again, what are you using it for? So like if you're using it for frost protection, you just gotta take it off every day and put it back on. But if you're using it for like pest exclusion, I don't know what crop you could get enough light to through a sheet. That would some research, I suppose. But it'd be cool if you could get like the bottom sheet where it has the elasticity around the corners for like raised beds. If you have a 4x8 or 4x12 plot and you throw like a queen size sheet over it with the elastic still intact, it'd be easier to secure, maybe less hoops too. I am curious though, like what the heat retention is with the sheet.
You're curious now, right? Okay, is this something that you're curious about? How might you use a bed sheet to protect your plants from chilly nights in the spring or fall? How much more heat do they retain depending on what they're made of? Is this interesting? Is this important? Reach out, let me know. Also find photos of what we discussed on our Instagram page at Serious Grower. Serious Grower podcast is a production of New Hampshire Community Supported Research. If you are interested in becoming a co-host or would like to learn more about our mission to democratize agricultural research, visit our website at nhcsr.org or come over to our YouTube channel at NHCSR, where we're sharing insights from the agricultural research community and vlogging about our research efforts on the farm, maybe trying some bed sheets outside. You can support this work by liking and subscribing, and even better, consider joining our Patreon community.